and we are interested in seeing how Africa's trade with the rest of the world can be improved. How can the rest of the world help Africa? One, trade policy towards the least developed region, that is Africa, should be pro development and pro integration and involve the sequencing, right? Give room for African Continental Free Trade Agreement integration for a transition period. Leave space for African trade policies to move towards convergence. Asymmetry. Unilateral duty-free market access for African countries, unified rules of origin first, and then allow reciprocity to come later. Right? This is saying there's some things that uh, we shouldn't pursue reciprocity with the continent, right? If we're interested in trying to give room for the continent to grow, allow them to some allow generous allowances in their favor, right? Like giving them free access to your markets, and allowing certain requirements to be raised later as those economies grow. Now, the World Trade Organization is strict and effective in enforcing its rules and also making allowances through waivers like AGOA. These approaches can be legitimized at the multilateral level, right? If we talk about asymmetry and sequencing, we can actually find ways to legitimize these approaches at the multilateral institutional level. Now, secondly, 21st century realities need to be imputed in trade policy making with the continent. 21st century realities like what? Let's talk about pandemics, for example. That's trade, concerning trade and medicine. That should be imputed in trade policy making. Let's talk about uh, Africa's very small manufacturing base. That's a reality that needs to be imputed. Geopolitics, geopolitical tensions, right? The direction that they're taking. That is a reality that must be considered. And even what certain geopolitical trends mean for the fragile political arrangements in many of these countries, right? If we care for freedom, we should consider this in how we formulate our trade policy. Finally, African countries should also mind their own splintering and take serious initiatives to improve trade integration. Professor David Luke from the London School of Economics, he has the opinion that Kenya's pursuit of the Strategic Trade Investment Partnership is an example of splintering, right? So these are proposals by that same professor, David Luke. Well, maybe to balance out, we could say a country like Kenya, whose fortunes are a little bit different from other countries and who therefore needs to pursue new trade relations, shouldn't have to wait for other countries. It's not necessarily true that the continent has to coordinate. Now, that's his view. This is an alternative view, right? Take South Korea, for example. It pursued its own interests. Let's end it there and continue these conversations about how trade on the continent, with trade between the continent, the African continent, and the rest of the world can actually um, be formulated in such a way that welfare benefits are delivered to the citizens of the African continent. We're done, baby.